Good evening, and welcome to the Putnam Valley Board of Education Business Meeting of November 17th, 2016. Please stand and join me as we salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and I would, first, I'd like to make a resolution to approve the minutes of the October 27th, 2016 business meeting of the Board of Education.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're going to have a very quick agenda shifting, as our student representative has a lot of homework and a test to study for, and we want to embarrass her and be conscious of her time and her commitment. So we're going to ask her to do the student representative report, and then we'll jump back to presentations.
Thank you. Okay, so the variety show has officially sold out for tomorrow. And also tomorrow is the international dinner, which students are really excited about because they get to try foods from different cultures. And the senior lounge has also successfully been installed, and students are down there at any chance they get because they love it so much. And for sports, Connor Van Riper came in 19th out of 120 people in the state championships race. And yes, for cross country. And for boys soccer, the Journal News had mentioned as the most valuable player, Leron Mariki, and had two honorable mentions, John Ranieri and Mark Zadrima.
Oh, very exciting. Thank you. Thank you, Erin. Always exciting to celebrate our student accomplishments. And if anybody does get a chance to see the senior lounge, if you're allowed in, actually, and not the kind of seniors that some of us are either getting there or there. I'm getting there.
I thought it was a senior citizen lounge. I stopped by.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It
is
is not only just beautiful, it has a real collegial college kind of air. It's a really nice space, very inviting, out in the open. So it's really great. If you are allowed in the building, we invite you to take a look. All right, now I'd like to move back up to presentations, and very exciting and fun ones we have today. And our very first is the recognition of the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES Students of Distinction.
Yes, and I'd like to introduce everyone to Dr. James Ryan, our new superintendent at the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. And he is here to present some special awards to students of distinction. We also have a board member from BOCES here, who is a Putnam Valley resident that everyone knows, Tina McKay, and John McCarthy is here as well, the assistant superintendent. So, Dr. Ryan, do you want to introduce? We're very, very excited for our students to be recognized.
Sure.
Thank you, Fran. Just want to say how delighted I am to join you this evening to recognize Dean and Janelle. I'm joined here by our BOCES board and liaison to Putnam Valley, Mrs. Tina McKay, Tina. And I also have joined an army of supporters for these two young people who do such a magnificent job in our program. John McCarthy, our assistant superintendent for administration. We also have our two building principals, Mike Soule from the Walden School and Nicole Murphy from Fox Meadow. The opportunity for me as district superintendent to get around to our 18 districts within our Putnam Northern Westchester supervisory region is always a challenge to get around to each one. But when you do it with such an agenda item like this, it's a delight. So in addition to overseeing the operation of Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, the chance to interact with our component districts and with our our superintendents. You have an outstanding one in Dr. Wills, and the chance for us to interact on a regular basis is a joy for me as well. So, Fran, thank you for your support, your collegiality, and your contributions to our 18 component member team of Putnam Northern Westchester. I'd like to introduce and ask Mike Soul and Nicole Murphy to step up and ask them if they would introduce the staff members who have joined us tonight. And you can go in whatever order you choose, but I'm really looking forward to hearing your words about our young students. I've seen them this evening. I've seen them once or twice earlier, and it gives me a kick to see them in their shirt and ties. That's always a great thing to see. But also the fact that they are such outstanding representatives of Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, of Putnam Valley, and of their families and friends. So thanks for coming out to support them, and on with the show. Let's hear what we have to say about these two fine young students.
Good evening and thank you. I am Nicole Murphy. I'm the building principal for Fox Middle and High School. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here tonight for Dean. He's one of the most amazing students, and I knew right away when we talked about student distinction, who could it be? And I said to the team, the middle school team, look at him. This is our guy. He's fantastic. And we had such great support from some of our Fox Meadow staff that I just want to bring up with me as well. Patty Lucido, Cindy, Christine Giorgio, and Emmanuel Howley. Okay, so this whole conversation that we're about to have is really a description of what the team feels about Dean. Dean joined our middle school program last year as a young, curious, and enthusiastic young man. It was apparent right away to the staff that Dean would bring tremendous worth to the core values of our middle school program. Collectively, the staff in the middle school have shared stories about Dean that have made them smile and laugh. Your teachers said that everybody would love to have a student like him. Your friends said that Dean is one of the best friends due to his sweet and helpful manner. To see the growth that Dean has made, both physically and emotionally, in the past 2 years has been an absolute pleasure for everyone. Mom and Dad, you should be very proud. On behalf of the staff and the students of the Fox Meadow Middle School, we would like to congratulate Dean for receiving the Student of Distinction Award tonight. Congratulations. We have this awesome award for Dean. And this beautiful ribbon. So proud of you.
I'd like to say that we knew Dean when he was at the Walden School as well, so it's in a short time he's grown up so much, but we can't be proud enough for Dean. My name is Mike Soul. I'm the principal of the Walden Learning Center. I'm very pleased to present Janelle Rios-Losada as our second student of distinction. Janelle joined us a couple of years ago. He was a Bedford student at the time. He's now a resident of the Putnam Valley District. Janelle has really made tremendous gains in our school. To me, he's the epitome of resilience. Even despite challenges that he's had in his life, he takes pride in his activities. He puts a significant amount of effort into his academics and his social skills. He's demonstrated really a substantial increase in his ability to tolerate frustrations, to work hard, to overcome challenges. His teacher, Mrs. Gonzalez Delgado, his family is here, and we can't be proud enough of Janelle. So on behalf of the staff and students of the Walden Learning Center and Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, I'm very proud to offer this Student of Distinction Award to Janelle. That's your Student of Distinction, and give him this medal of honor.
People often ask, why would you want to be on a Board of Education? Well, you just got the answer, because we get to celebrate students' accomplishments, whether they come to our schools or come to our, throughout our educational sphere. So we're so excited. Thank you.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening. These two young men are really sources of great pride for us, but I know first and foremost they're that source of pride for you.
Yes,
So,
and I just want to thank you, Jim, for your initiative and the kinds of things you're doing at BOCES to get us together. Very often, we think of BOCES as out there. We need to remember these are our children, our students, and we're grateful that we have this wonderful opportunity for them. And with your leadership, we wish you the best.
thank
in
you
your
so
new
much,
role.
and we're really honored to have Tina McKay on our board as well, so we'll stay in close touch.
Thank you very, very much for coming. One more thing to be grateful for at Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Okay.
Janine, you might want to say a couple words what BOCES is for people who might not know.
You want me to? Okay.
Just say a
So Mr. Cohen is prompting me to say a little something about BOCES. BOCES is the Board of Cooperative Educational Services. There are several BOCES in our area, but the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES is the one we're a component member of. There are 18, all of the Putnam County schools, as well as the Northern Westchester schools. And BOCES provides I always say it's not your mother's BOCES. BOCES provides a wide range of services for all students of all abilities, all needs, all interests, ranging from academic, physical, emotional, vocational, and everything in between. So we're very proud to be a part of Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. And if you have any other questions, you can contact them or us anytime. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming.
BOCES takes a very strong role also in career development and in creating opportunities for students to study areas that we can't possibly offer here, given the limits of a small enrollment. So we send students there who are able to get involved in fields that we couldn't possibly provide in a school of our size. And it's really exciting for them when they leave BOCES. Many of them have excellent jobs. The culinary program and the electrical and the graphics, and there's a health program there now. It's very exciting. So
The key word
very
is
fortunate.
cooperative. The key
Yes.
word is cooperative. The 18 districts, we all share, and they supply services which we cannot afford or are not able to do.
Or
So
at a
they
lower
are
rate,
helping
right.
educate all our children. And not only our children, they help also educate our staff.
Right, that's right. Okay, terrific. Staying in the feel-good mode, our next presentation item is our athletic director would like to give us a fall sports update.
It's like talk about impossible act to follow. When I just came back from many seasonal dinners at the end, and I always see the kids in their suit and ties and the girls dressed up very nice, and I always tell them, you are allowed to dress like that on a regular basis, but it rarely happens. But congratulations to Dean and Janelle. Very good. Fall season highlights for 2016. We have, much like we said before, boys soccer all-league was won by Liron. Also, he was the co-league MVP. And Alec Irving and Byron Bravo also won all league. I can give you this. All section was won by Liron Mariki, and they went to a dinner also with John Ranieri and Mark Zadreamer, who were all section honorable mention recipients. They went Colonial Terrace last Tuesday for that. The team made sectionals this year, and we had a new coach, Diego Escandal, who, if you've had an opportunity to meet him, he's a very positive individual. We're really happy to have him on board, and I believe he is now working with Joe Palumbo, which is just down the road, so hopefully we'll be able to retain him and keep him a part of the soccer program for a long time. Cross country awards, there's a lot with this one. They just barely finished a couple days ago. All league recipients: Connor Van Riper, Joseph Abate, Michael Tompkins, Claire Cassidy, Ella Torregrossa and Dora Rippon. All-County first team for Connor Van Riper. Third team, Joe Abate, Michael Tompkins, Claire Cassidy, Ella Torregrossa, and Angel Zhang. All-State, we have third, Connor Van Riper, and ninth, Michael Tompkins was an alternate. And we have team awards. Both the boys and the girls teams won the league titles this season. So the banners are down. They'll be newly numbered and put up very soon. We have the boys came in third in the counties, and both the boys and the girls came in third in the section. And of course, Connor came in 19th in the state with a time of 16:45. To me, that's like inconceivable. I can't imagine actually accomplishing that. Maybe in my youth, but it's the top state performance that we've had in Putnam Valley history. It's excellent, just outstanding performance. Yes.
Let's hear it for Connor.
They had their cross-country potluck dinner last night, which was excellent, very well attended, and they had highlight videos, and it's just wonderful when all the kids are cheering for each other. And you know, running isn't the most glorious picture moment, and they still cheered, and it was fun. Field hockey, we had all-league recipient Katoe Abe and all-league honorable mention by Taylor Simpson, and we had all-elite honorable mention by Katoe Abe, and the Golden Dozen Award was also won by Katoe.
Wow.
That is a very highly selective
Yes.
award. It's only obviously 12 in the section. There are very strict criteria that she needs to meet to make that. And the field hockey team also made sectionals this year. The girls swim team, this was the newly merged team that we had. We're the lead team, but Mayapack joined us. And there were quite a few more swimmers that came over. Sometimes that's typical. You think there's 2 or 3, but then when the merger opens, you know, kids get excited to try to join that. So we had somewhere in the 7 or 8 students join us from Mayapack this year. It was very successful. The parents were thrilled, the coaches were thrilled, and the kids had so much more success. So I think overall it was a great merger for both of the schools. We have all league recipients Leah Frankel, who is ours, and Emily Dancy-Geyer is a Mayapack student. And all section was won by Emily Dancy-Geyer. We did send 2 individuals to individual events, and we had 2 relay races, but we had a sickness, so they didn't actually get to race, unfortunately, but it was nice that we did actually have students go to sectionals this year for that team. Girls soccer, all league, we had Madeline Deegan, Morgan Wintergradoff, Caitlin Cohen, Maria Dedvukai, Emma Rippon, and Antonia Hoyos. We had all league honorable mention for Jillian Hansen and Lindsay Cohen, all section Madeline Deegan, and all section honorable mention for Morgan Wintergradoff. And the team made it to sectionals. They had a home win, which is very nice. It's been a very long time since we've had a home game and then to have a home win. So we advanced to the second game in the tournament. Girls volleyball had a great year. All league, we had Kiki Cruz, Megan O'Leary, Allie Dick, and all league honorable mention Liz Moyes and Taylor Mello. All conference was won by Kiki Cruz, and all conference honorable mention by Megan O'Leary, and the team also made it to sectionals this year. I went over to Valhalla to see that game, and I mean, if you weren't in love with volleyball before that game, you would be after. It was really incredible. At the end of the game, we did lose. We pushed them to the brink. I really thought we were coming back, which is very hard when you're down by 2 games in volleyball. It's usually considered it's over. But when the game ended, both stands just stood up and cheered for the performance that both of these teams put on. It was really pretty incredible, the athleticism and skill that was out there. The football team had all league recipients Constantine George and Darnell Shillingford, all section recipient Constantine George, and he was also the Section 1 Class B Offensive Lineman of the Year. And we were the winners of the Blythedale Hospital Bowl. This was a new 2 bowl games in one day for Class B. Class B football was some considered kind of pushed off to the side a little bit when you had the Class A and Class AA games all in one day. So the Conference 3, we spoke about having a showcase for Class B football for those that didn't go on to the sectional tournament. So these are charity bowl games that were put on by Valhalla. And Jamie Block, over the athletic director at Valhalla, does deserve a lot of credit for putting these on. His team was not in this, and it does involve quite a bit of work. And there is quite a bit of cost involved when you're running 2 football games. So we thank him very much for that. The trophy is down in my office if anybody would like to see it. In addition, Family ID is up and rolling. You know, there were a few bumps in the road, and they continue to be there, but overall, I think it was a pretty successful rollout. I told people if they don't register on time, next year I'm doing 20 emails in a row. You know, when you register right away, you get frustrated by that, but we did have typical people wait to the last minute, so that was a little unnerving for the nurses. Both Jackie Leclerc and Sabina George deserve a lot of credit. They really do. They stepped up. It wasn't something that made their job easier, just everyone else involved, mine, the parents, the kids, so on and so forth. So they took the brunt of it, and we were successful in the high school, and now Jackie is finishing up the middle school. So definitely give them a thumbs up if you see them, and thank them for taking it on. It was not easy. And we're open for winter season for both JV and varsity at this point, and modified will open on the 28th. So we're moving on to the next season already. Very excited. Thank you very much.
Brian, I got a question for you.
Absolutely.
The indoor sports for winter, I'm specifically thinking about track. That's combined with Haldane, correct?
Correct, and they are the lead team.
Their lead team. So everything happens over at Haldane as far as practices, et cetera, et cetera?
No.
Okay.
We do hold practices here. A coach does come over and facilitate practices here. They typically will warm up and not do anything too advanced until the coach does show up.
And what kind of participation is it in that as far as our school, typically?
It depends. And that is actually something that the coach and I are talking about now, because we want it needs to be safe and productive in both directions. It's not as big as spring track. The exact number I don't have for you, but it is pretty strong. You know, the problem is we don't have an indoor track, and we don't have, you know, otherwise it might be something to consider, because we do have a really strong running and track and field program here in the spring. Obviously, cross country is doing very well. Our coaches are excellent in both the sports. So unfortunately, we're just at that point that hopefully Haldane will still continue to invite us in to participate over there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know we're holding our PEAC meetings now in the evening, and I guess you're getting folks there to talk about our program. So that's very good.
Okay. So our next agenda item is one that there has been much committee work, and it is the high school later start time committee meetings update.
We started talking about this issue last year and did some preliminary looking at it. And this year, early in the year, we actually retained a consultant to help us with some of the transportation issues, because it's very complex. The complication in transportation is really a core issue for us. And so we've had a better handle on what can and can't be done, or what's difficult to do. We also formed a committee which was representative of the district, and included parents, teachers, students, administrators, the board, and community members. We had 34 members on the committee. And we had 3 meetings, because much of the work was done in between the meetings, and during the meetings we had presentations and discussions. The first meeting, we laid out an agenda for how we would do the work and what the main issues were. And the second meeting we had with the transportation consultant, and the third meeting was one where we talked more in depth about some of the options, and really we focused on a particular option that seemed the most plausible for us and could do the things that we wanted to do with this process. So why do we consider a later start at the high school? Well, it's about the research on adolescent health, adolescent well-being, achievement, mental health, all of the aspects of the whole child, and in a school district where the child, first and foremost, is our legend here. It is our main motto, if you will. This is something that we felt compelled to take a look at. The publicity on this matter has reached all levels of the press, but it also started with scholarly work, and we had members of our parent group looking into this with us, members who were researchers. So, you know, what are the parameters? So we start with this research, which I'll go into a little more. We are, you know, one of the earliest starters, if you will, in the area. Beginning at 7:10, there's only one other school that begins that early. Some of the neighboring schools begin at 7:17, 7:20, 7:30, and a few begin at 8 o'clock. There's one, I think, that begins later than that, at 8:15 or something. We see student tardiness and absenteeism as issues that we need to address, and we had an attendance summit last year to look at ways to ensure that students were coming to school, and the early start certainly was something to think about. We are seeking to improve academic accomplishment here and to support students in their social emotional health. Students are at their bus stop, some by 6:10, in complete darkness, walking in the dark on country roads, and arriving at the school at 6:45. Some arrive as early as 6:20, apparently, at the high school. Students now begin their lunch at 9:30 at the high school. So it's well, if you get up at 4, you might be hungry then. But it is something that, you know, when you're into a routine, this is the way it is, you don't often question the outside parameters. But I think the board particularly was very, very interested in taking a look at this and saying, you know, what could we do, what can we do with regard to this issue. So the research findings I include in this report because I think we have to take this into consideration. In fact, we saw a movie recently, the Nova from PBS, which went into this research on the circadian rhythms that shift during the teen years. And this pushes girls and boys to stay up later at night and to sleep later in the morning. This is Scientific American research. We have, because educational start times do not adjust for this change, early school start times limit sleep in adolescents, effectively limit sleep. There is the research from the Center for Applied Research, University of Minnesota, in a study that tracked more than 9,000 students in 8 public schools. After one semester, when school began at 8:35 or later, grades earned in math, English, science, and social studies typically rose up a quarter step, from B to B plus, and so on. But that is a steep change. So we wanted to ask some questions, what would happen with a 30-minute change? Actually, the research says that even if you go 30 minutes later, that there's a noticeable change. And also higher test scores and, in general, better academic progress. The major conclusion is that a later start time improves learning, and the later the start, the better. So, you know, it's a question of what you can do, because sometimes it's impossible, and that was true in the film as well, that sometimes you take a smaller increment in order to make some headway in this situation. So when we look at later start, those were the academic findings. Well, there were also findings on emotional health. So the impact of even a small change on truancy, behavior problems in schools. Later the first period begins, higher the distribution of student grades, less likely to skip first period class, better driving and fewer accidents. Other factors with an early start, insufficient sleep, lack of exercise, poor diet, use of a computer for 3 or more hours a day, physical fighting, cigarette, alcohol, marijuana use, sexual activity, depression, suicidal tendencies. All of these seem to be factors that are impacted by the start time of the school. And the early start may impact risk-taking behaviors. So, given the findings from the research, we started to take a look at what can we do. Because frankly, when you take a look at the preponderance of evidence, you want to try to do something to make a change. So if you look, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the start times in the region, we saw a survey with 27 responses, and as I mentioned before, Carmel and Putnam Valley were the earliest starters. So with the committee, looking at that research, we took a look at some alternative options for starting early here, because right now we have a 3-tier bus system, and we have constraints that have to do with the contract that requires a 3:30 dismissal, no later than that at the elementary school, and that sets up a number of constraints in terms of how you get people to one place and to another, particularly in that 3-tier system and how it worked. So 3 alternatives were reviewed based on the analysis by the transportation consultant. Each involved moving from a 3-tier to a 2-tier bus system in order to create a later start within contractual requirements of a 3:30 dismissal at the elementary school. And so the first option was adding 5th grade to the elementary structure, K-5 and 6-12 transportation. The second was creating staggered K-6 and 7-12 systems. And the third, transporting students in grade 5, 12, and K-4 on 2 runs. So what would be the impact of each of these findings? Well, first of all, we took a look at the K-5 and 6-12 model. And we looked at advantages and disadvantages. The salient advantages for that model would be to provide a developmental consistency and continuity of curriculum and structure for 6 years at the elementary school. The transportation would be divided equally with addition of 3 buses. More opportunity for professional collaboration. The most salient disadvantages, in an analysis of the capacity, and we also did contract with an architect for a capacity study, and an analysis of the capacity and usage of the elementary school indicates that the usage would require additional classrooms and/or reduction of current resources provided by the current utilization. In other words, we have more programs being offered there than in the past, and the capacity would certainly constrain the full provision of these programs.
So Dr. Wills, to be clear, what this model calls for, because I don't think it was clear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It calls for moving the 5th grade
Yes,
to the elementary school.
Exactly, for the 5th grade staying at the elementary school. Sorry if that wasn't clear. So that the 5th grade would stay there, and that would mean that a whole additional grade would be there, and so you would have this pressure on the square footage of the building, the need for certain square footage for special education classes, speech and language, reading, and other requirements. We also have a makerspace there now. We're trying to do different kinds of things, and we found that there would be program constraints, and we would have to remove resources that we have now, unless we added to the school, which is significant. It's very expensive to do so. We got a cost analysis there, and it's $1 million per additional classroom. The other piece that was a concern there was the program disruption at the middle school with elective opportunities, the 5, 6, 7, 8 balance we have now. The 5th grade at the middle school is seen as creating a younger environment that appears to reduce behavioral concerns for the early teens. You have from the student perspective, there is a sense of increased independence. So when a 5th grader comes to the middle school, there's that sense of slowly releasing control and more independence for the fifth grader. There's a potential loss of instructional space and a possible impact on program or shared staffing required, and an increased load at the elementary school for the nurse, the psychologist, and the specialists. So this, there was a general consensus that this was not recommended at this time, this particular option. The other option, the next option we looked at, was a K-6 and 7-12 model. The most salient advantages here would be the even distribution of students on buses. The addition of 2 or 3 buses would be required. The results in aligned classes for 7 through 12 with opportunities for shared staff and students. So there would be more of that alignment.
Dr. Wales, again, so for clarity's sake, this keeps the 5th grade in the middle school, but splits the transportation between the grades in the middle school, so they go with, some go with the middle school and some go with the elementary school.
Exactly. So there are 2 tiers, and there's a K-6 tier, 1 group of buses, and then another group of buses would be 7 through 12. The 7 through 12 would be the earlier buses, then would be the K-6. So you basically split your middle school into sort of 2 groupings in terms of the time. And when I say the addition of 2 or 3 buses, we know that we're going to have to add some buses to have a 2-tier system, but this was a fairly economical model because you're dividing them more equally. The most salient disadvantages was the disruption of the middle school community, that the school would certainly not have the cohesion and unification that you have right now with the 5-8 model. You would complicate staffing, and contractual considerations would have to be taken. We'd have to consider some of the contractual issues when you have the division of the staff and the timing and the time they're there. Removing opportunities within the middle school for some electives, for some students participating in clubs, that would be more difficult, and scheduling accommodations would be more difficult. It would just be a disruption to the educational resources of the program. So at this point, the consensus really was that it wasn't recommended at this time. Which left, and this is just a graph that shows the capacity study of each of the schools, and as I mentioned, the capacity of the elementary school would certainly be burdened, and we'd certainly have to think about how we would either have to add classrooms or lose some of the resources now with some of our facility. At the middle school, we were at capacity, and so that's something also to consider. Right now, our building at the middle school is pretty much at capacity. So the focus then became the K-4 and 5-12 option. In other words, 2 tiers of buses, the K-4 school separate in the second tier, and the first tier, that is the start of the day, would be a 5-12 bus tier. So this was the focus, looking at several areas. First, it would be least disruptive to other school communities and resources. It wouldn't disrupt the totality of the middle school. It wouldn't disrupt the elementary school as it is. The possibility of moving to a uniform 5-12 start time of 7:40 seemed to be something we could, in other words, we could attain this. We felt we could attain this. And I have to say that Pat Bellino was very helpful in looking at this and seeing that it could be attained logistically. And there would be dismissal at around 2:18 if we started at 7:40, or if we started at 7:50, a dismissal at 2:30. The analysis of this model indicates that the addition of 4 buses would permit execution of this plan. The cost per bus is approximately $60,000. However, reduction in fuel and efficiencies could result in reduction of this cost.
Just for clarity, that is an annual cost, right?
Yes, it's an annual cost, and we're not buying the buses for $60,000. This is a contract that we have. So when looking at the contract that we have with the bus company we currently use, the cost of each additional bus is approximately $60,000. That That's a contractual cost.
And Dr. Wills, both of the other plans were 3 additional buses, so
They
they all involved additional
They
buses.
all involve additional buses. This probably involves more additional buses. This involves more additional buses, from 3 to 4. In other words, it would be 4 buses that we'd have to add. But balancing it with the educational component, this was the preferable, and had to be really the recommendation. We felt that the educational concerns of the other 2 options was such, the disruption would be such that it could not be something, I certainly couldn't recommend them, and I think the general consensus was from the group that they were disruptive. Whereas this was a possibility which would maintain the educational integrity and would be able to provide for this later start. It would expedite what we had wanted to accomplish by having this particular focus.
I have a question. This addition of 4 buses, was the declining enrollment looked at to see how long 4 buses would be necessary, how many years into the future?
Well, it's hard to look at that. I have an enrollment, you actually have an enrollment document on your table. If you look at 5 years, you look at a reduction to about 1610 or 1620 students, 1,620. But that is not as, I think, as valid as we may think. Because this year, for example, we expected more of a reduction, and in fact, we have almost the same number as we had the last year. So I can't really, you can't, when you go out 5 years, you can't really say. But it looks like from our early grades, the numbers in our early grades, that certainly in 5 years or so, there would be a reduction. Whether that would mean a whole bus, I don't know, probably. If you're looking at 1,700 now and 1610, yes, probably the reduction of at least one of those buses. Because 60 or 70 are
it
on the
really
bus.
is based on the routing as well. I mean, it's not just
Right.
it's
It's not just the numbers.
it's where they live. So,
Right.
that's where
We could see
that's where
You
the
could
three
see a
buses
reduction.
instead of 4 additional
Yes,
3 or 4 years down the
It's
road, but we don't
possible.
know.
yes, you
Right.
could see, you definitely could see a reduction in that. But I don't want to promise, but you definitely could see a reduction. Yes, the contract, right, you're not going to buy a surplus bus. And buses are $90,000, but of course, they're one-time purchase, but still, you have to replace them. That's a whole other kind of model.
and
there's
have someone
maintenance
to
and so on.
drive them.
Yes. So let's look at what I did in the presentation. What I tried to create was one that gave the perspectives of the different constituents in the committee. So the advantages and disadvantages from the perspective of each group. From the parents, the pro perspective was that this change responds to preponderance of research-based evidence on the impact of the early start time on student achievement, the physical and mental health of students. It promotes safety for walking and waiting in dark, early morning hours. And for many parents, there is a struggle getting their kids out the door, so let's, in the morning. It's very early, and it is difficult because, as we know, with the circadian rhythm that we've learned about, it's very difficult for teens early in the morning. The negative from the parent perspective, there were concerns about students from middle and high school on the same buses. There were concerns about time for after-school help and conflicts with clubs and athletics. There were concerns about the possibility of later return impacting homework and actual sleep time. I'm going to go into some of the responses of this in the latter part of the presentation, but I wanted to at least acknowledge the major areas. From the student perspective, and we did a survey, which we would like to follow up again because it was a little, there was a little vagueness in the survey, but we wanted to get some initial insight. Student survey indicates that 108 of the 108 respondents, about 25% of each class responding, are not in favor of the late start. 64% of those responding prefer the current time. 38% would prefer a start between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. So a majority would like to keep things the way they are. A follow-up survey, as I mentioned, is planned. In the narrative responses, because there was room for extended response, students were concerned primarily about impact on their after-school responsibilities and the ability to participate in extra help, clubs, and athletics. And I'll respond to that later when I talk about the response to the concerns. Student expressed concerns about lateness of homework, which would affect bedtime. So kids are concerned about if things go later, then their whole life at night goes later after sports and being in the play and so on and having the homework done. Students generally like the early dismissal time. They see that there is time for practice, for work, clubs, etc., with that earlier dismissal. The teacher perspective, I'm sorry for the small print here. I'm going to put this on 2 separate slides. Why don't we post this on our website? High school teachers acknowledge that the research they acknowledge the research. A recent survey of teacher opinions provided responses from 34 teachers. 50% of the teachers feel the change to a later start would have a positive impact on student performance. It's actually 50-50. 50-50 with their responses. 48% of the teacher respondents felt that students were not alert during first period, but 75% felt that they were alert during the second period. And today I had a chance to interview more in depth, to do a teacher interview more in depth. And the teacher was very clear that first period, the students were just basically like zoning out. They were extremely tired. But second period, it all changed. And that from then on, the students were very alert. And it's very interesting because that's what the research actually says about just a little bit of change in the time can make a difference. It's interesting because I wanted to find out a little more about it. Most of the teachers felt that the first period absenteeism was a problem, but only for a small group of students. They didn't see that as a major problem, the absenteeism. The concerns that were mentioned, they were concerned about the scheduling and opportunity for after-school help, concern about traffic at drop-off of the students in the morning and more traffic on the road at a later time of the morning for everyone. They're very positive, the teachers are very positive about the new leadership at the high school and are engaged in a number of initiatives, and they feel those would be disrupted with the additional challenge of a later start. They felt that this would be one more thing to have to deal with when they're trying to do some other things to really, like a rotating schedule and the IB program, that this would impact that. The later start will impact the schedule of after-school activities and possibly extra help, some discussion of activities before the regular day. That is in question because once you do that, you've set up a situation again where kids are going to be there early and who can get there and who can't, and that's an issue. There were comments on both sides in the survey with concern about mixing ages of students on the buses and the desire to maintain the current system that they feel works satisfactorily. So both sides. Some felt, as I said, it was a 50-50 split, if you will, with different kinds of reasons as well. From the administrative perspective, so this is basically after looking at everything from our perspective, from the administrative side, district administration, certainly some of my own conclusions from all of the work that's been done and reading all the surveys and the research. First, the benefits to a later start. Research-based evidence on student well-being and academic achievement points to the later start time as a positive direction. Student safety in early morning hours would be greatly improved. Further opportunity to address attendance and tardiness. One issue which is personally for me very ridden with anxiety is the weather delay decisions, which in this district you have to make before the light of anything, and very difficult because you have to make up your mind by 5 o'clock in the morning.
But it would make a 3-hour delay. You know, you can actually get more school days in because you can
Yes.
do a 3-hour delay instead of canceling because they'll
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, we'll have a little more information. I know that some people who have a little later day, they can make the decision with a little more time
Because
to
we've
consider.
discussed before where the elementary school could have gone in on time and had no problem with the roads. It's just because we start so early that the plows weren't able to
I
get
know,
out.
it is an issue. There's no question about it. The plows, you know, and we have parts of this community that really get some significant weather. So we'd be less constrained by the need to make that decision very early at 5 o'clock. The alignment of the middle school and high school schedules would provide flexibility in teacher assignments and student opportunity for advanced coursework. While right now we have aligned periods, they're not aligned, there's a gap. You know, there's the first period and the last period are not there. So you can't do some of the sharing that you may be able to do, both for students and for staff. With additional runs in the morning, the time on the bus would not lengthen. Now, this is because the change, okay, if you have you have more buses, your routes can change and result in shorter neighborhood runs. In other words, your runs now, I hope this can be clear, if I'm making myself clear. We'll have denser runs, so they're more like neighborhoods. Whereas now, you know, to get the route in, you're going much, much further with fewer kids in any one place. And so that, to me, is very significant, because while you might have students 5 through 12 on a bus, most of them will be siblings or neighbors, and, you know, people who actually are babysitters or that you're familiar with.
You could probably fill up an entire bus with Floridan alone when you have 5 through 12 on the same.
Well, that's what I'm
bus.
saying.
You know,
I mean, you're going to have,
it'll be very dense.
it'll be a different kind of a route. This configuration, K4, 5, 12, would not disrupt basic functions of other schools, including the middle school program and the elementary school dismissal time. In order to make that happen, we would have 4 buses posted at the elementary school to expedite the dismissals. And that would be, I think, really helpful for a number of reasons, to have some buses there in emergency situations.
What was the impact, if any, I'm sure you looked at it, on our kids who go to BOCES and other programs?
That's the next thing. So I'll talk about it later, but I'll talk about it now. BOCES, we would have to run a separate bus for BOCES in the morning. And that would be maybe one of our, well, go ahead, Pat.
Well, basically what we're looking to do is, it looks like projected for next year, there's about 11 students that will be in the first session. We'll call it even dozen, so you say, right now, what happens, they get on their buses.
Pat, why don't you use the microphone, because either come up or use the microphone, that we keep.
Yeah, as I was saying, David, right now, I'm projecting it looks like about 11 students that take the BOCES, what would be the BOCES first section. There's 3 sections of BOCES. The first one is the one we impact at this point. Out of the 11, it looks, I would safely guess about half of them will get, and it's usually for the seniors, that's the senior group, it's the second year of the program they're in. About half of them I would estimate would get a parking pass, you know, so that they'd be driving. But what would happen is any student that wouldn't, rather than them coming here, we would be able to, at that point, run a van, you know, one of the larger vans, you know, 20 passenger, and go and actually make a loop, pick them up and take them directly to BOCES. So that's the plan, you know, that's what we're estimating we can do right now. So, you know, everything right now is flexible based on, you know, as we go further with this, if the board decides to go further with this, so.
You know, and it isn't, because of the details of this that would have to be worked out, everything we're saying here is supposition in a sense that it's the best we can do at this time. We will, you know, as we come to a conclusion, and this is something we want to do, we will have to solve problems going forward, and it will be, you know, something we will have to look at everything in a problem-solving manner to make sure that everybody is served properly. That's parochial schools too, and private schools. So some of the concerns, you know, the fixed annual cost for transportation increases between $200,000 to $240,000. It could be a little more than that. As I mentioned, approximately $60,000 per bus for 4 buses. BOCES and private school transportation would require an additional bus prior to school start. That's what we just mentioned. Time would be needed to look at scheduling at the high school and other initiatives that are in the planning stages. So there may be some scheduling that we do differently at the high school, and that's something that would be ongoing thinking. That wouldn't really be necessarily affected by this change, but it would be part of some of the things we're looking at. Right now, the period before school at the middle school provides some flexibility for tutoring, intramurals, and other opportunities. We couldn't do that. So that's something we would have to look at as well. So here's some response to some of the concerns expressed by constituents. Buses and ridership, for example. The time on the bus is to be determined, but more likely be similar or less time than current runs due to the shorter runs with more dense household ridership. Grades 5 through 12, as I mentioned before, the probability of siblings, neighbors, and almost no seniors and few high school students on the buses. Older students often provide a protective tempering of middle school student behavior, in fact, because currently high school students do ride middle school buses. They come in later on them, and for various reasons, and there haven't been difficulties.
And middle school students come in on high school buses.
And they come in on the high school buses for those morning period, and there aren't any issues. So then there's a clarification in response to concerns of late afternoon activities with the 2:18 dismissal. So the current departure time of athletic away games is 2:45. Dismissal with a later start would be 2:18. So as far as games go, there wouldn't be a problem. There'd still be time for students if they wanted to do some homework or some downtime before the away games. They could even be at a club for a while. Clubs and extra help would be available before practices if the practices are moved to 3 o'clock. And that's what Brian was talking about. The practices would all be at 3 o'clock. So there'd be a time for the clubs, just as they are now. So it's only on away game days that you'd have the issues. But the drama participation would still be available. And I spoke to the Haldane superintendent because they run this schedule. They have a 7:30 start. They're trying to go to 8 o'clock. But at the 7:30 start, they do exactly what we're talking about here, and they have their clubs and they have their athletics, and they don't have problems. Somewhat later homework time would occur if students chose not to do the homework prior to game time. If they have a game, or if they have practice at 3, yes, there would be some later time getting home, but they can also do homework before. They would have time before to do that. So I did put some enrollment comparisons in here, and actually the red gives you this year and the blue was last year. So you can see that the trend is going down. If you look at the numbers in red in the early grades, you see that's where the lower numbers are. Just as a picture of what it looks like just in this 2-year. This 2-year that we're looking at here, just 15, 16, 16, 17, you can see where those lower numbers are. That would lead you to the point where maybe you could drop a bus at a later period if things continue to trend that way. This just, so our enrollment this year was 1693, last year was 1701, so there really was almost no change in this year, and this is just the different buildings. So the next steps would be the board review and answering any further questions from the board. Public comment will be invited through a website special. We're going to try to have a special place for comments, and I think we're going to look at our app. The comments section of our app is what we'd like to try to get people to do. Our app gives you that opportunity to make comments, and we're going to set it up, let people know. We'll send an email out letting people know how to do that so they can post comments. And then we're going to have a number of formal meetings. There'll be an Inside Putnam Valley video coming up in December with information. And formal meetings would be live streamed and posted. So we're looking at a public forum on Thursday, December 8th at 6 o'clock p.m. would be here. We'd have a public forum. One prior to the board meeting on Thursday, December 15th from 6 to 7. And we would project a Board of Education formal consideration at the first January meeting, January 5th. Questions?
Oh, well, I have several, but just regarding the last slide with the meetings, was that, do you think we might want to have that, that expert, what was the guy's name? Larry, would he be available just to have,
Yes.
you know, real solid responses to the public's concerns there?
Yes.
So.
I think it's one of them. We could
Yeah,
say
one of them. I don't know if we need to pay him to be
maybe the
involved.
one before the board meeting on December 8th.
And by
December 15th.
And maybe at that point, you would have
Some
actually
questions came up.
created the routes, you know, based on our current numbers, if you were to do that.
Yeah, we've held off on that, Joe, until, we wanted to make sure the board wanted us to go, you originally started with 3 options. The committees have come down to one that they would suggest to the board. Now it's up to the board to decide, do you want us to move forward? I'll be honest, I didn't want to expend the monies to have somebody start working routing if you decided not to go this way, so.
But I have one question related to routing and relating to buses, or Jill actually would know the question. What's our general expenditure annually for buses now?
Well,
About-
Jill can give you
That's-
much
that's
quicker,
right.
let's put it that way.
For the home to home to school runs about 1.4 million.
Because 240,000, let's do larger case scenario.
Additional,
240,000 sounds like a very large number, and it certainly is. I'm not saying $240,000 is not.
20% increase in our cost. in
No,
that
but
area.
we are a 40,
Yeah,
$5 million budget.
that's based on the contract that we have now with them. We don't know, like we said, how many buses that means down the road. And, as far as the enrollments go, they look like they're going down. We are having an influx of students at the end of August, it seems, in the past 2 years. That's been going on. I don't know if that's going to continue to go on or not.
But we did see your birth rate document showed only 72 or 76.
Right, a big drop.
A big drop for next year?
Yes.
Next year's kindergarten class.
So
Yeah,
this,
Or
this
that
year was
birth year.
supposed to be 72.
So, yeah.
I just, the thing is,
Yeah.
to look forward and not just 5 years for something like that, because, it's not known what would happen beyond that. And once you go to 2, going back to 3 as a possibility would be almost impossible. So,
Yeah.
I'm just making suggestions. It's just gonna, if you have to go up more on buses, obviously it's gonna be more. So.
but it seems to me that there's, we're presenting a worst-case scenario as far as from a cost perspective,
to,
which I
yes.
think we need to.
Yes.
But I think beyond the declining enrollment as an opportunity to reduce that increase in cost, there also, I think there's an unknown that was expressed by Larry about the actual usage on the buses. And I know that we have a significant, I used to do it. I used to drive my kids in from Roaring Brook.
Me
A
too.
significant, parent drop-off of children. I know we have to have capacity for all of them, but I think then the reality of the actual ridership may allow us to scale down. There's an opportunity out there,
And I
maybe.
think up front, if we were to do a split, K4, 512, essentially going to be 511 and maybe 510 and a half as far as actual bus ridership. But I think you'll probably up front, with those parents that are concerned having 5th graders on a bus with high schoolers, you might see an increase in drivers for the younger kids that would be on that bus. But at the same time, if they have older siblings that are going to be on that bus too, then that's going to keep that together. But with that expenditure, I think, if I'm just rough numbers, it looks like we're doing 20 or so less runs a day by going down to 2, because you're not doing 3 runs of 14 buses
Well, I'll
anymore.
give you-
It's going to be a fuel
idea.
savings?
So you're saving on fuel significantly.
Well, we actually do, we run 15 buses right now. actually a 16th because you can't get back from Roaring Brook. So there's three runs of 15. So there's 45 right there, plus you add in the one extra, so there's 46 runs. 2 runs of 20, obviously is 40, which, is a net savings of runs of 6, if you look at it that way, so.
Yeah, but you got to go back and forth.
No, I'm talking about the run, I'm just using the one, one way
that's
just
only
to
one
give you an
direction.
idea, so, yeah.
So, but as far as the total, it looks like it's about 84 to 86 runs we do now, and we'd be down to 64 to 66 runs.
So what's the
new
what's the
model,
cost
so
per
20
run on
less
the
runs a
gas?
day.
Right. Plus the other nice thing, David, with the new contract that we negotiated was that previously it was all miles we paid for with the contracted company. The new one is what's called live miles. So when they leave the garage, the mileage doesn't start till they get to their first starting point, and it ends at their last starting point. Their last ending point, I should say.
But I mean, we could do the calculation on
Right.
what 20 runs a day on 180 days.
Right, what that looks like.
What that calculates to and what the average run mileage is, and then you can back into how much we'd save in fuel.
And those, to be honest with you, those are the numbers we'd look at if you decide you want us to go forward. Just going back, David, I think to your question about utilization, after, I want to say converse, but after we went back and forth with emails, Larry looked at this, again, a preliminary look, 50,000 feet up. And we figure that the utilization would be about 80% is what would be really, the buses would be utilized at about an 80% number at the and you average it out.
But I think, if I remember his presentation correctly, that he was basing some of his assumptions on a typical school district, and we might not be typical.
We had more of an educational meeting with him on that as to what we look like and how we look, and then he took, after talking to Michael Koenig and myself, he took another look at it. And again, he's still got to massage these numbers.
And as we go through this process, I'm assuming we'll go and do the clicking.
Excuse me, Joe?
We'll do the clicking. We'll actually do ridership. How
Right,
many
yeah,
kids are getting off every bus over the course of like 2 weeks.
You'll take
and figure
attendance
out.
over a certain period of time. We do that at the beginning of the years anyway, and then, we'll maintain that just to see how, we want to be as accurate as we can be, so.
Are there any things we're not thinking about? I mean, we're all talking about surprises to the downside, I guess, that would reduce cost in the future. Is there anything that we're not thinking of that might increase costs in the future beyond the $240,000 annually?
Again, I can't predict that, but
I know,
I
but
don't.
I just.
With the 240, I think, we're throwing a number out there that I think is being conservative. We're trying to be as accurate as we can. I actually think the number's less.
And it could be less. If we go with more buses, a bigger contract, it might be a less per.
Right.
Yeah, we might be able to.
That's
So
possible.
this, again, I just want to repeat, the worst case scenario, we want to see if it makes sense to look forward at the
Right.
worst case, and if it does, then hopefully we'll be surprised going.
And does
to a
that
lower-
estimate of $60,000 a bus, does that include the drivers within that
That's our
60,000?
cost, that's the contracted cost, right?
It's all part of it, thank you.
But before you really get into talking about buses, you got to look at some of the things that was said, like on slide 18, bullet 3, 48% of teachers felt that students were not alert during first period, but 75% felt that they were alert during second period. At least that doesn't make sense to me from my own experience. If I have a student who is sleeping, or not really alert, he doesn't get any better. He doesn't miraculously wake up later on. I don't see.
They do.
Not, at least I don't see that. I'm just saying I don't see that.
Well, it's interesting because from the teacher's perspective, by second period,
Microphone.
I'm sorry.
From the teacher's perspective, and this also goes along with the scientific research, that the circadian rhythm kicks in with a different kind, at a certain point, and the students do become more awake, even though they didn't maybe as much sleep as you thought. That very early time for them is a very negative experience in that very early morning. That's what was interesting. In fact, the movie we saw showed that they were looking at different kind of light. The movie from Nova, the Nova film, indicated that many districts could not see their way to making this change. They had very early starts. They couldn't do it. They tried. And so this research was done on, is there another way that we can get students to be more awake and alert? And what they did is they introduced this blue light. They looked at all different kinds of spectrums of light, and they came up with this blue light that they put into their schools. So the students are more awake very early. But what that indicates to me is that what this teacher is observing is that there is this rhythm. Suddenly it kicks in. And by second period, third period, these kids are much more awake. And it's true. Interestingly enough, I think when the kids do these surveys, because they're saying they're very negative about change, but if we gave them the survey when they were trying to get up in the morning, they might have a very different response.
If you had to take the survey first period.
Than when they're filling out the survey late in the afternoon, when they are awake. That there is something else going on in these circadian rhythms. That's what the studies have been about.
Well, and those are, that's peer-reviewed stuff, Scientific American. These are, my instinct is always to follow, the facts.
Overwhelming science.
The overwhelming science it has been.
But it's interesting.
And if we can make, I'm sorry, and if we can make an impact in a positive direction on learning for our kids, it's a big deal. This could be a real game changer for our kids by just doing this. And I think if I saw that 7:40 or 7:50 start time, if there's evidence that every 5 or 10 minutes has a little bit more positive impact, I think we should look at the 7:50, not the 7:40.
I had a question about that also.
7:45 is about the limit. And the reason for this is then you're going to start to impact the athletics, then you're going to start to impact the clubs, and most important, you won't be able to get to that dismissal time at the elementary. It really becomes a problem. That's why we limited ourselves. That's why.
So in this, it appears that the 7:40
7:40 to 7:45
is more doable.
Yes, 7:45 is probably the max.
The issue becomes then we're actually starting the middle school 5 minutes earlier.
Well, call it 10, just say to safety 10. Well, let me throw out another thought for you. The more I keep thinking about this, and the more I was looking at this, because I like to look at the whole district, we're looking at the later start time for the older kids, but I'm also looking at the fact that we have the latest release time at the elementary school of any local school. I think if we concentrated on roughly a 30-minute change, so like I say, so instead of 7:10 start at the high school, looked at a 7:40 at high school, middle school, which is really 10 minutes earlier than what they start right now at the middle school. So it's moving the middle school, just moving the time 10 minutes. What I think it buys us is actually a little earlier release, which the release right now is 3:20 at the elementary school. I think we can get that to 3:05, 3:10. And people may say, well, that's not a big deal. Why you're looking at that? Well, and I can only give you anecdotal evidence of just being up there. How many parents come up at the end of the day to take their kids out for dental appointments or doctor appointments? They're missing class time at the end of the day at the elementary grades. So again, I can only give you anecdotal evidence. I can't give you anything hard at this point.
But that's a parent choice, though.
Well, again, but if we as people that are looking for the education of the students, we've got to offer the best opportunity.
But we also have to be conscious of the
parents,
child care options as well.
Right.
The later, for working parents, the later the child gets out of school, the less child care they could be paid. There's a lot of options.
People that are using the children's center, it would still be available.
Right.
They'd be up and running. It's
But
not a
that's
big deal.
not-
The main thing is being able to keep to the contractual things and do it in a way that is it's doable. So I would say if we went for 7:40 or 7:45 as the latest, that's probably the best we can do.
And that essentially, what the issue becomes only on athletics, away game issue. And every other issue is taken care of where you can still have club time or extra help time and then still do your sports if you start at 3. The only time there'll be an issue is when they need to leave 15 minutes earlier than that for,
Which you have to do. You have to go under,
Well,
and you still have a half an hour
Right.
for your club.
You'd roughly, Joe, if you went, for the full 40 minutes, you're looking roughly at a release time of 2:30, which still,
as opposed to 2:35 as to
Right.
what the middle school has now.
right.
Right.
So the next step, we've had, the committee was very representative of all constituent groups. I think the parents were the most highly represented, looking at the numbers on the committee. Or is the conversation on the committee been, should we do this? Or how are we going to do this?
Well, it's
Meaning,
fixed.
is it a done deal that we
No.
want to start later?
No. We did not, at the committee, as I said, I think the consensus was that those other two options were not options that we should go further with. This option, there was not a consensus, let's go. There was no, that really wasn't. There were mixed views from different folks on the committee. I would say the parents were pretty much in favor of going. I think the teachers have mixed views, as I mentioned, and thinking of the other representatives. I think the
Students.
board was definitely for it.
With the
The students are mixed.
I think that's something we have to actually look at. I think we actually need to survey the students.
Yes.
And not only the current students, but if we can possibly get a hold of the students who've graduated, say, in the last 5 years, and ask them what they think about this, just to find out a student's opinion.
I don't know how we could do that, but we could try it. We could put it on Facebook.
Well, also, I mean, the survey that was sent out to students previously didn't have any context that said, if we started this later,
That's
you
right.
could
That's
still
right.
do
That's
clubs
right.
and you could still have extra time for the extra help
Yeah.
and be able to do theater and
So-
sports.
But
What
they
I'd
have to
like-
understand that, yes, they still do it, but the time is now shortened.
Well, not really, except for away games.
Well, the clubs, and the time between the last period and when they leave to go to the sports is now shortened. So
No, because
getting
you're gonna-
clubs in the
you're gonna
help
move the
section.
start time to
It's still a
practice.
35-minute or 40-minute,
I mean, you're going to move the practice start time later.
3 o'clock.
right.
But it's the games, we have games.
The practice times are now 2:30, I believe, and they would be 3 o'clock.
But it's also the games, you know.
Games at 2:45, yeah.
I
mean,
think
there's no
that
question.
is an area that we'll
Yeah.
continue to look at if we're going to further
Yes.
consider this, because there are so many facets of after-school activities. One thing that I did note to Dr. Wills, there were parts that's noted perhaps before school activities could occur, but I agree with her that we don't want to force then students to get up for an extracurricular activity
Yeah, I worry,
early again, because
They
that would
won't
be
be alert.
defeating what we're trying to
You
do.
can't learn that early, we know that.
Well, yeah, we don't want to
you know,
to
it's
work
not
in
a
the
perfect-
opposite direction.
It's not perfect. One of the things that may impact this would be, what they're working on at the high school now is looking at a schedule where they would have an activity period during the day, where some clubs and some other things can occur during the school day, as opposed to everything after school.
I work in a high school that has a common lunch.
That's what they're looking
So
at.
there are 300 more students than we have, actually almost 400 this year.
That's what they're looking
And they
at.
have a common lunch, so clubs happen, extracurricular help
I mean,
happens.
it's similar to the college model, where a lot of them, like, for instance, Wednesday between 11:30 and
Yeah.
2 o'clock, there are no classes, it's only activities, you know?
Well, we're
not-
looking at something like this. That's why I said, in one of the comments, we said something about the schedules, and we're looking at other things as well. So those things would,
Will that
if-
dovetail into this process or happen after?
it would happen after, because it has to be, I think, once you have something settled, then people can work from it. Right now, it's not settled.
Now, one of the questions also is, you know,
But I will say that there is, overall, we have administrative support for this. And the focus is first and foremost the child, right? So if, as an educator, if I'm looking at kids and, looking at our children, looking at this research, I have to be where I am with this and say, I would like to do the right thing for our students. And I know that students feel they don't want the change, but I also know that.
Well, I think 2:10 is a very attractive time for a lot of people. Having your day over at 2:10 as opposed to 3 o'clock, for everyone, for our students, they probably like it, but you're right, we're asking them at noon. We're not asking them at 5:30. And
They get
they're
out at
not.
1:50, actually. They get
Get
out
out
at
1:50
1:50.
now.
So they're not
Actually,
taught.
the earliest would be 2:20, you know,
Right.
the earliest, you know.
So, I think that I do believe that we have to survey the students, but I also think this may be the grown-ups make the decision time, for this and what
So
makes sense
maybe
and
we
what
could get some
aligns us
help.
with other districts.
I would appreciate some help on the survey so that people feel that it's a good survey. I like that idea of, your ideas for the survey to make it something that works better. And we could try to post it on Facebook and get some students who have graduated and get some input from them as well.
Now, some of the comments from at least the initial report you got from faculty was absentee data, or they're saying that it was only it was an issue for a few. I think we've got the data. We need to look at the data. How many are coming in late? How many are not coming first period? We've got that data. We can look at that data and see how many people are coming in at second period. I mean, I know you shared something a little while ago about
Yes, I
absences
had that on
first
the
and second.
slide, and it showed
It's a lot.
significant absentee.
And again, scheduling
Tardies
to take
and
care of
absences.
some of that too, as far as what you put first period. I mean, I remember when I went to high school, I had chorus first period. I was definitely coming to first period because I wanted to go to chorus. But, coming to trig was not something I wanted to come to first period.
Or that could work the opposite way. Nobody may join chorus because it's not that big a deal
And
and let
there's
me
something
sleep.
else. There's something else that I think is important to state is that this year, given our expenditures, and I know Jill is giving me the the look, but given our expenditures
I love that look.
this year and our the retirements that we do have, which gives us some savings. So we're not looking at adding to our budget, okay?
We started a new
I
base.
just want to take that off the table. This will not add to the district budget. Yes, it will add an
To this
expenditure,
expenditure line.
but
It will
We'll
be,
There will-
increase this expenditure line.
in
but-
one
right,
line,
this
it's
We're going to
line,
have
right.
reduced
That one
expenditures
line
elsewhere.
Reduces in other
but
lines.
the other areas will be reduced.
I just have one more very small question. I'm concerned in light of, it's November 17th. We don't have a survey for students. We want to talk about this, and we're entering a very busy season, that January 5th is ambitious.
I know it's ambitious, because you know what? I know those things happen. If you make it January 5th, then maybe it'll be the second meeting in January, but it will.
So there's an option to
We've
move it to
set, this
January
is what we
19th.
set in the beginning. We
Okay.
set an ambitious agenda. We've
fine.
followed it so far. And I think, the thing is, if we don't make a decision by then, a lot of things are going to be uncertain. I think our budget has to be planned.
That's fine. I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
it's the budget adoption that we're locked
No.
by legal, so
No.
I think that we may be more looking at January 19th,
That
but we
would be
can
fine.
keep it like
I just
this.
think
That's
we have
fine.
to keep in
That's
mind
fine.
that there's,
and I think a major thing to be said here, we're not, even if we do whatever we do, it's not saying we're going to do that for 100 years. I mean, we're experimenting with a different model, and if it doesn't work or we see it impacts things in ways that we didn't want to, either we change it, we tinker it, or we scrap it. I mean, I don't think we look at this as something that we have to be doing this for the next 10 years. We're trying this, and maybe it's 7:40 is not the time. Maybe it's 7:50. Maybe it's 7. It's really a matter of figuring the
Well,
cocktail
okay,
out.
based on that, I think we need to understand what are we looking to have change in a positive way. And so we get some baseline data, but we we want to look at whether
Right,
this
what are the
was a-
metrics that are a
what-
success?
Right,
What
metrics for success. Is it just a teacher survey saying our kids are now awake on first period, or is it actual, attendance and performance? And the performance is really what we're looking for at the end of the day, right?
And on the back end, are we seeing negative impacts on other things, the activities and sports and that type of thing? I mean, there are metrics that we can get to that aren't.
Really at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's
So
at the
we're
end of the day.
We are going to be talking about this for a long time, and it's been a long meeting so far about this. I think the most important thing is we get a lot of chance to talk about it. We need to hear from the public. There's a website, email section, I understand.
Yeah.
Inbox.
Mr. Dyke, Jeannie, would you be able to help with the comments, get the comments section on our app? We'll get something out to let people know that if they have the app, they can use the comment section. Otherwise, they can do the email.
Okay.
And you'll have the Inside Putnam Valley video that's going to be distributed.
Well, we're going to be working on that in December.
Will that be before
December
the first
13th,
meeting?
I think we're having, but maybe we could make it earlier,
Well, and maybe we can just do
We'll do
also-
it the first week in December.
And maybe in December, our December 15th meeting, just have it on the agenda and update. So we have another opportunity to talk.
December 15th is going to be a forum.
Right.
So at each meeting,
And then it would still be on our agenda.
Right.
yes,
To talk about the forum,
yes,
what
yes.
happened.
Have the forum and then have the
And then still
discussion.
have it on our
Board
agenda.
discussion.
Board discussion, okay. If anybody wants to continue the conversation, that's fine, but
Just a last question for Guy, our resident statistician. You looked at some of the research that was cited there. Did it look as though it was valid to you and reliable, et cetera?
Valid is a very tricky word, obviously. It's difficult unless you get, and there wasn't enough of the detail to actually go in to decide how they did it, how they questioned, how they measured things. That's what it comes down to. How did I actually do it? As I said, the thought of that one statement that we had about the second period versus the first period, I didn't see that, at least the schools that I've been involved in. But again, you have to really get into how these questions were asked, the exact wording, what was the situation they were asked in, and what was said beforehand. There isn't an easy answer for that, Ralph. There really
Okay.
isn't.
Thank you.
okay, so I'm putting this on the agenda, putting it on the calendar. Okay. It was very good, a very thorough presentation, Dr. Wills, thank you. And I want to extend my thanks, and they will still be working, to the committee. It sounds like a lot of discussion, a lot of soul searching and chatting and research and in-between meeting conversation. So thank you to everybody who participated. All right, Ms. Figueroa. The next item on the agenda is a financial presentation.
Okay, good evening. I thought tonight I would try to accomplish or take a look at one of the goals that we set forth in the beginning of the year, which was taking a look at long-range financial planning. And basically, I'm going to go through a presentation that doesn't necessarily, it's going to give a prediction or a forecast at the end, but I'd like to talk about how we get there first, so that I can educate people at home and get everyone thinking about the things that go into that. So a multi-year planning is something that, it's a process that I intend on preparing and updating annually. And in order to do that and get a viable multi-year plan, there has to be what I think is a solid organizational planning done before we can make the forecast. So in multi-year planning, usually look at a 3 to 5 year financial projection, and then I try to identify the structural deficits or surpluses that are could be going on at the time, in the prior years to go forward, and then collaborate on implementing any initiatives that, help contain costs. Then we would align our revenues and expenditure trends and take a look at our fund balance to see how they can help us get through that as well. So in our organizational structure, we have these types of plans to look at: our instructional plan, our technology plan, what our enrollment trends are, our staffing plan, capital plan, and financial plan. So in the organizational structure and long-range planning, we ask some questions. How does our organization structure drive the implementation of multiple or different planning initiatives? So, what do we have that we want to implement over the next year or the years coming, just like we're discussing the tiering of the buses? How do we organize our communications so that we can collaborate this, and how can we provide a value for strategic planning? We continue getting board and finance committee input. In other words, go to the Citizens Advisory Committee, because all of these people serve as contributing forums. And then we have to consider and attempt to figure out how budgeting and instructional planning go hand in hand. And these are things that I can do to prepare myself for those things to make a successful budget. And some of the things that I've been trying to get involved in is attend instructional meetings. It's important for the business official to understand those things that are needed in the instructional programs, learn about the instructional programs and the assessments process, become part of the dialogue and instruction itself, learning about more of their scheduling and scheduling issues in the buildings, and understand instructional challenges and opportunities. The organizational structure and long-range planning is another, sorry, I'm losing my place here. Another place where we have to ask some questions. How does our organization structure drive? I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. No wonder I couldn't find where I was. It's getting late. So then we begin to prepare the forecast. I try to be as simple and transparent by using existing general ledger data that we have. We take our historical data that's already audited and accurate and try to come up with some simple assumptions to prepare the forecast. I try to use as much flexibility as I can with sufficient level of detail without getting too intricate, and use friendly charts and graphs that give me an easy way to change my assumptions and efficiencies for what I feel a 3-year projection is more reasonable. A 5-year projection, especially in our economy right now and unpredictable, circumstances, 3 years is probably more realistic. Keep in mind, the economy is affected by current events. I think that's important. Adjustments in federal and state aid distributions and retirement system rates, health and premiums, they can fluctuate from year to year. So while I'm working with those assumptions, I try to evaluate and discuss the reasonableness of them. I consider impacts of being too aggressive. I try to figure out if I can sustain them going forward. Consider impacts of being too conservative. That's just as bad as being too aggressive. Consider impacts if there's going to be a loss of an instructional program or staff member. Refer to data trends from historical information and definitely try to understand all of the union contract language and the impact on us in the future. So in doing these things, I have to look at all of the revenue assumptions. I have to make some early predictions. This is a little dark, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can lighten it up a little bit. No, I think that's it. Sorry about that. Okay, so taxes are the biggest part of our revenue. So that's tax cap driven, and our debt is declining, which you'll see in a future slide that I have, and that really impacts that tax cap calculation. The CPI this year forecasted around 1%, maybe slightly higher. We're in hopes that that might be the case. So financing or completing a project can impact the cap, and the tax levy has to be has been reduced over the last 2 years by the school district, so that can also impact how our tax cap looks in the future. The last 2 years, we lowered our tax cap $650,000, which is part of the calculation going forward, so it can definitely impact that. Another area of our revenue assumptions that I have to try to make early predictions on is our state aid. I do know that about 50% of our state aid is expenditure driven. And this year, I know I'm expecting a little bit of a rise in the amount of BOCES aid that we should be getting due to some, things that we've been implementing and using BOCES services for, so I can predict that. Our building aid, depending on our projects that are ending, they take over 18 months to start getting aid for once the final cost reports are in to the state. So I know we have some projects we finished up in the last couple of years. So when the building aid rises, that also affects the tax cap calculation. So those are all factors in making those assumptions. Our other sources of state revenue are pretty unpredictable. They include interest earnings, out-of-district tuitions, building use, and some refunds of prior year's expenses. Those don't really impact our revenue side of the budget very much. The appropriated fund balance is what we use from our reserves in order to balance our budget. Should we not have enough revenue to cover the cost of our expenditures, and we have been making use of those fund balances, which means that year after year we are putting back into the budget, giving back funds that we've raised through taxes. So those are also a consideration, the reserves that we have when we're doing the budget. And this year, what we call the people call it the EBLAR, it's EBALR, Employee Benefit and Liability Reserve. We have quite a number of employees retiring at the end of this year, so we will need to adjust our current reserves, and they will help support the revenue side of the budget this year. We also have to, so then on the other side of it is the expenditure assumptions. We have our general support area, which includes district and business functions, changes in personnel, technology needs, reductions in energy savings will occur as a result of our energy performance contract when that comes through. The instruction part of the budget, we have retirements again that will help reduce the salaries in future years because of the labor contract considerations that we need to take into consideration. We have the transportation area of the contract that could be impacted by changing to an early start time at the high school. We just talked about that. Increasing the amount of the buses that we may be using. And then we have the benefits part of the budget that is one of the larger parts of the budget that will be impacted by reduced employer contribution rate from New York State Retirement System. We are having another reduction in that rate this year, about 2% lower than last year. So it's gone down in consecutive years, which is going to help us a lot with our budget this year. Health premiums, there's going to be an increase. I did not get that information. They're predicting it to be out tomorrow, so I'll be getting more information on that. I don't know the percentage increase. Last year it was 2.5%. Considerations also for any Affordable Care Act impact, and debt service could increase as a result of the energy performance contract, but then again, the offset and the savings in the general support part of the budget.
Jill, these are just graphics. They're not, the quadrants don't mean anything. I'm just making sure.
No, it's just it's my way of saying
bullets.
Go in different directions with the expenditures and the revenues.
There's no data that, okay, just making sure.
No. Okay, so here is, and I had a pointer that I was using. I have one. Okay, so on the right-hand side of the graph is I'm gonna get my pointer because I feel like it's gonna help. Thank you, sorry about that. On the right-hand side of the graph, we have the total expenditures over the last 3 years. So I have 13, 14, 15, 3 years consecutive. And you can see the revenues and the expenditures are fairly consistent. These are all the different areas of the budget. We have salaries for teaching, non-teaching, equipment, contractual expenses, materials and supplies, BOCES services, tuitions, textbooks, debt service, employee benefits, interfund transfers for capital and other types of reserves. And again, our total expenditures and revenues are running fairly consistent. You can see where there are certain changes, from year to year, and we could go over those in particular, but they are fairly consistent through the years there. So that's when we decide, are there any corrective actions needed when we look at a trending graph like that. Even in a well-run district, financial stress can develop in 2 or 3 years. Rate of growth in revenues and expenditures must be aligned, and we have to ask ourselves, are we going to have any additional revenue sources? It only takes a few years for those cumulative deficits or for a district to exceed all fund balance and reserves. And then the next area to look at is our capital planning opportunities. Capital planning is optimal when the debt schedule shows that debt will decline in a future year. And projects, keep in mind, take 2 or 3 years to be put in motion. And with the tax cap still controlling our ability to levy new taxes, it's wise to plan those projects accordingly in order to keep debt service and its payments flat for the interest and principal. So here's a look at our debt service as it is right now. You can see there's pretty much, it's steady at the moment going across the graph, but it is going to drop off in 21-22. So that is something that I need to take into consideration and use as a forecasting tool going forward. So as far as instructional planning, when you have instructional planning that you need to do, multi-year improvement plans, possible later start time these are examples, possible later start time at the high school, going to a two-tier transportation system, other things such as maintaining manageable class sizes, possibly strengthening ties between curriculum and technology, and moving forward with an EPC project, our energy performance project. So in order to do that, we have to have strategies that may require considerable collaboration in order to identify what we might need to give up. We may need to allocate available new funds to these initiatives in order to make them happen. Or we can reallocate some of the funds that we are going to realize from the retirements that we're going to have. So a forecast involves projected operating results that we looked at, the 3-year trending, all of our revenues and our expenditures that have been trending over those 3 years, and our reserves and fund balance. So in looking at all of that, I did put out somewhat of a projection over the next 3 years. These are estimates, and as you can see, I did make some assumptions in there, but unless there's movement in the CPI, the increases in the revenues will not trend at the same pace of the expenses unless there's another revenue source somewhere that evolves. And my 8 assumptions are based only on expenditure-driven trends. So these are the revenues, and you can see they're declining. And then the expenses also declining. So therefore, our available leftover funds at the end of the year, they're declining about $500,000 per year. Now, but assumptions have been made. So the debt service being partially funded out of our reserve account, which is something we've been doing in our last few budgets, as well as increases in salaries and health premiums. I took those into account. Reduced retirement contributions for the teachers. Additional cost, the possibility of adding buses, that was factored into this. And the projected principal and interest for the energy performance contract. So those are just some of the things I know now, but I was able to predict enough to show you what could happen over the next 3 years with those items. And then, again, we have an unrestricted reserve at the end of our prior year of the 3.9%, which were allowed by law, and then we have our restricted reserves, and those are all the different types of reserves that we have right now.
Jill, you have in that previous slide, you have no assumption for any retirements other than next year?
The current year's retirements and how they go forward.
But no additional retirements in years
No.
2 and 3?
No, because that has
We don't know that.
We don't know
right.
that, and because we have quite a few this year,
Might be
I'm
quiet
not
for a while.
suspecting that it'll be really active, but that's not something I know. We do have a large population, though, of teachers and CSEA
That are eligible.
who are eligible. And so the benefits of long-range planning, I just wanted to note a few of those. They provide clarity and transparency on impact of trends that the district is experiencing. It provides the school district with more time to plan for opportunities and challenges. It provides information for supporting sustainability and managing change in the district. And it provides a foundation for supporting the district's educational vision, as well as a framework to support collaboration between financial leadership and instructional leadership. And that's what I hope to accomplish by setting this as one of our goals. Anybody has any questions?
I do. First, a comment. I can't thank you enough for the work you've done here. I think my second meeting on the board forever ago was I asked for long-range planning. I was a CEO of an organization that was that looked at that, and I couldn't believe we didn't have a 5-year plan and without forecasting. And I know the later years get a lot fuzzier, and that's how it goes. But without it, it creates a lot of anxiety about what the future might hold. And I think in planning our budget and seeing the forecast, and of course you're going to change it as you go. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate your work here. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
And the other comment is I'm sure Pat, you're working on this, but our capital projects plan is going to is now going to be merged in with this financial forecast so we can they'll work together, right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
That includes the 5-year facility safety plan that we have to do?
Right,
Okay,
the 5-year plan that we
Are required to do and that we do.
Yep, last year was a brand-new updated plan. Those things will start to work into this and take on a life because of our debt service where it is right now, and that's the, the way to keep that even.
And that was $11 million? Wasn't it like $11 million, something like that?
On the
total, even though we were.
Yeah, the 5-year capital plan, yes. Yeah.
And this is nice for us to refer to at the start of every budget conversation.
Yep.
That we know what we're thinking, we know what we have to look at, what we have to consider, the questions to ask. And is this going to be on the website or is
Yeah,
this
it's
for
definitely
us?
going to be posted on our website. These are things we have to keep updating, as you say.
Right.
But I just want the public to also know,
Right.
you
And
know,
it helps
that these are
inform
the
their
things
questions.
that people have to think about in order to do all this planning. And, you know, the Citizens Advisory Committee, the Audit Committee, you know, just so you know that it all comes together somehow.
And the instructional, essentially, ultimately, it's really the instructional that informs a lot of our
drives.
decision. And like, for instance, in here, we don't have, and you know, if we end up becoming, and I know there's exploration of becoming an IB high school, that if we become an IB high school, there's obviously more expense that goes towards that. That's not put in here because it's not developed yet. But I mean, those are the kind of things that we need to think of those things, not for the next year,
we
but
can
for
plug
the
that
next
in
4
and then
years.
change the
Well,
projections based on
what's
those.
really important is that I stay in close contact with those people, because
Right.
you can get
It doesn't
very...
happen in a vacuum without you being at the table.
It gets very sidetracked to what I think is important opposed to what is
What
important.
actually happens is we all meet together, and we are talking constantly about.
And I will say also, you know, to Jill's credit, you know, we were recently asked to start to look at our budget, and it was like, wait, it's October, you know, it's not even November yet. But it really does, you know, when I sat down with the office staff, and then I met with the entire special education department today, it really opened up conversations that are very proactive instead of reactive, sort of in the 11th hour. And, you know, what do we think is, you know, the future? What do we think about next year and 5 years out? What are we looking at? How are we going to design these programs? And really started the conversation so early that I feel almost prepared to start to make my recommendations soon. And it's nice to have that, you know, forecast for the next number of years. So it is helpful. So even though it's a little jarring as an administrator right in the beginning of school, it is very proactive and thoughtful. So.
You know, it's things like when we have initiatives that Jill's approach to things is how can we make things happen. It's not a barrier,
Right.
you know, well, we have this. It's
can't
very
do
much about how can we make things happen. And we've really worked together. For example, BOCES aid is very helpful to the district. When we have a project and we go through BOCES, we can predict that our revenue, therefore, will increase in the next couple of years. And that's the kind of information, that's the kind of constant discussion that really does put us in good stead and enables us to do the things we want to do to promote the vision of the district.
And again, just the financial anxiety when you're sitting there looking at a budget and a tax cap that, you know, that you could be surprised by a shortfall of 5% or something. In the old days, you used to ask the taxpayer for more money. You can't do that anymore. So, and this, it feels like we're making that surprise of a shortfall less likely. So it's
you know, there
really
are
helpful.
black swan events that do occur. I mean, we could have, for example, what I was reading with the governor's budget, where they're looking at school aid again as an issue because they haven't made their revenue projections. So that is the kind of thing that could happen. It happened a number of years ago, not
But
that
then
long
now
ago.
we at least have
But
a
we
format we
know-
can plug it in and say,
yes.
okay, they're reducing it, and this is now
But
what
we
it's going to look
have-
like, and
we
we can
have a-
accommodate.
And
This
we don't know what the
is
Department of Education is going to turn into now. So there's all kinds of things that go wrong with that.
So anyway, the point is, and I think, Dave, you said it very well, Jill really has done an exceptional job in her role, you know, placed in this role just a few years ago. Just we came together at the same time, and it really has been very, very helpful for everyone. Because
If there's
of this
anything that you,
approach.
you know, you want to talk about planning or approaching, or, you know, those are things that we need to talk about now. The budget meetings are starting to take place this week, and I'm getting pushed to after Thanksgiving when I wanted to be before, but that's okay by everybody.
Thanks
Because
for your
it is
flexibility and your
early, everybody's
reasonableness.
just getting started, but it takes me a while to put it all together. But, you know, so if there's anything now in the next month, that's when we need to talk about these things, and we need to make decisions about the transportation and whatnot. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we've already heard from, thank you very much, Jill. We've heard from our student representative. I do not see a representative from the PTA or the PTSA, but we do have a superintendent here,
Yes.
and she's ready to give her report.
You know, I was going to actually do another little presentation, but I'm not going to. But I was going to talk about the Superintendent's Conference Day a little bit. It was really quite a whirlwind. We had a number of activities, and we did have a sort of pre-reflection on some of the future of school issues that came up in that NOVA film, which we saw, and then we had a reflection as in buildings on the major issues that came up, and that one of which, as I mentioned, was the school start times, but a lot of it had to do with learning research and learning things like how reading really works in the brain, and that provided some real a platform for discussion at the elementary school, because we continually look at that issue of reading, and especially in the early grades, and realizing that our brains are not wired for reading. They're not wired there. We create that through our learning process. We create places in our brains. We create those ganglia and so on that ensure that we can read, but it is not a natural process. And therefore, we're always struggling with strategies to promote reading. And we had some opportunities for curriculum work, and at the end of and we had for example, the English department met, and I facilitated that, and then Sandy facilitated the math department. So we had the different departments meeting on the most recent curriculum work. And also, at the end of the day, we had a session with a social worker from through BOCES, who talked about this issue of teen, adolescent suicide, adolescent depression, the issues that people are facing now with young people. And it was a very powerful discussion. Her main focus was on what we notice, that teaching ourselves and teaching those around us to notice other people and what they're feeling, and to notice what do we look for in students, and how do we strike up the kinds of conversations that'll get us the information we need so that we can be helpful to students. So it was a very, very productive day for all of us. I wanted to congratulate and wish best of luck to one of our alumni, Alyssa Marsica, who graduated in 2007, and who tomorrow will be defending her doctorate in analytic chemistry at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and we wish her the best. And those are the kinds of great pieces of news that we love to get. I wanted to say a few words about the High School Achievement Center, just that we're noticing some really great results, some measurable results. That is, students whose grades actually have improved through going to the Achievement Center, and also through our new response to intervention, our RTI program at the high school that is so very specific, with a goal of not allowing anyone to fall through the cracks, if you will, making sure every student is seen. We congratulate the players in Lend Me a Tenor, and we're looking forward to a musical that I'm sure we're going to enjoy given the talent we have, and it's Billy Elliot this year. That will be our musical. Our variety show is sold out already, and it will go to student scholarships. We also had this wonderful program at the high school called Rachel's Challenge, and this is, again, we'll miss Linda Cefaloni. She's retiring, but she does some wonderful things with our Make a Difference Club, and this Rachel's Challenge was based on the student who was the first to die at Columbine. And it's sort of a mystical kind of thing, because her parents found her diaries and predicting certain things about her own life. And the project is one that's focused on kindness, and how do we have acts of kindness in the school. And the challenge is to look for the best in others, to dream big, to choose positive influences, to speak with kindness, and to start your own chain reaction of kindness. And there's been an awful lot of that work here at the high school over the past several weeks since that presentation of Rachel's challenge. Also, I wanted to note that there'll be another gratitude festival at the Tompkins Cultural Center Monday night, and I urge our community to turn out. This was a wonderful program last year. We had our temperamentals there. They'll be there again. And it's a way for our school district to give to the community by presenting our musical program at our cultural center
Tompkins
here.
Corners, what time is it?
That's at 7 o'clock. That's the Gratitude Festival. Also, I wanted to thank our teachers at our phys ed teachers for the gym show at the elementary school. If you ever want to see something that lifts your spirits, it's watching those little ones in their Olympic competitions in the gym show. And I finally would like to wish everyone a peaceful and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wills. I'd like to open it up for public contribution on the agenda items. All right, let's move on to new business. And Ms. Ferraro, will you start with number 1?
I'd be happy to.
Good.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the Putnam Valley Central School District-wide safety plan as per document number 120/17 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 2.
Pass.
Yes,
I'm not sure you're allowed to do that. I don't think that's in the bylaws.
Oh, here we go.
Be nice to Maureen.
That's what happens. You gotta give her flowers.
All you have to do is say, as promotion number 2, attached to the official minutes of this meeting.
Whereas the Board of Education of the Putnam Valley Central School District is contemplating entering into an energy performance contract to install various energy conservation measures and equipment at the district's school buildings and facilities, including ancillary costs. The proposed action, and whereas said capital improvements are subject to classification under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and whereas maintenance or repair involving no substantial changes in an existing structure or facility, replacement, rehabilitation, or reconstruction of a structure or facility in kind on the same site, including upgrading buildings to meet building or fire codes, and routine activities such as renovation to or expansions of existing public school facilities by less than 10,000 square feet are classified as Type 2 actions under the current Department of Environmental Conservation SEQRA regulations, Section 6 NYCRR 617.C 1, C2, and C8. And whereas the SEQRA regulations declare Type 2 actions to be actions that have no significant impact on the environment and require no further review under SEQRA, and whereas the Board of Education, as the only involved agency, has examined all information related to the Energy Performance Project and has determined that such project is classified as a Type 2 action pursuant to Sections 617.5, C1, C2, and C8 of the SEQRA regulations. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby declares itself lead agency in connection with the requirements of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby declares that the Energy Performance Project is a Type 2 action which requires no further review under SEQRA. This resolution shall take effect immediately.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Nicely read. Number 3.
Resolved on recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the board president to execute an employment-related agreement regarding employee number 11171662400 as presented to the board at this meeting. A copy of said agreement shall be incorporated by reference within the minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 4.
Resolved on recommendation of Superintendent of Schools to appoint Jean Cesario to a 6-month probationary appointment effective November 21st, 2016 through May 21st, 2017 as a part-time office assistant at the Putnam Valley Central School District Operations Department on Step 1 prorated of the CSE salary schedule.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 5.
Resolve the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint Susan Coughlin to a 6-month probationary appointment effective November 29th, 2016 through May 29th, 2017 as a part-time office assistant in the district office PPS department on Step 1 of the CSEA salary schedule.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 6.
Resolved on recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation of Rachel Kay from her position as a teacher in the district effective the close of business on March 19th, 2017 as per document number 122/17 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 7.
Resolved on recommendation of Superintendent of Schools to accept the resignation for purposes of retirement of Joan Silva from the district effective the close of business June 30, 2017, as per document number 123/17 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? And once again, we have a whole meeting in April where we acknowledge. I can't imagine walking in and not seeing Joni Silva at the front, but we'll be talking about that, so, and acknowledging all our retirees at that time. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 8.
Resolved to approve the 2017-18 school year budget timeline as per document 124/17 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
What this document goes through is starting now, when the committees are meeting to set the budget, it goes through to when we actually vote on the budget in our district at our level here, which will be in April, and then when the community votes on it in May. It also talks about the BOCES budget, which we adopt in the middle of April. So it gives the dates of all the critical factors, and it will be posted on our website.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 9.
Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education hereby appoints the following full-time teachers to additional science teaching assignments at the high school to cover a leave of absence effective November 16th, 2016 through the remainder of the 2016-17 school year or sooner at the discretion of the Board of Education with compensation in accordance with PVFT contract. Amy Lee Ludovicki, additional .1 teaching assignment, bringing her to a 1.4. Bruce Ludovicki, additional .1 teaching assignment, bringing him to a 1.3. Will Carano, additional .3 teaching assignment, bringing him to a 1.3. Jerry Zupan, additional .1 teaching assignment, bringing him to a 1.1.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda, number 1.
Resolved to approve the consent agenda items 2 through 14 as presented to the board at this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
We have the CSE, CPSE placements. We're approving a teacher to administer the Wilson Reading Program. We're approving a teacher to administer special language services that one of our students requires. We're approving the overnight trip for all the 4th graders to the Laconic Outdoor Ed Center. We're approving a high school building mentor, somebody who's going to work with all our teachers in the school. We're approving a health advisory coordinator. There are actually 2 coordinators. We're approving a contract with the Westchester Institute for Human Development for assistive technology and audio services. We're approving an agreement with Manhattanville College for Excellence in Teaching program, where they'll supply apprentices to work with our students and staff, and we will also apply guidance for their apprentices. We're approving the postseason coaching for girls swimming, for cross country. There's 2 that we're approving for, and 2 for volleyball. We're approving additions to the substitute tutor list. We're approving an educational contract with the Eastchester School District for one of our students who attend schools there. We're approving the boys lacrosse coach for the spring season. We're accepting a donation from Charles Costa Theater Design for the Performing Arts Center for some lighting.
I just want to clarify one thing about Wilson. It is for multiple students, and it is from the federal grant that we get, so it's not to exceed that amount for multiple students.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to open it up to public contribution on any topic.
I have a few things.
You're part of the public.
It reminds me, based on the field trip that we just approved, and we had a lot of conversation when we were talking about the reenactment day that we had at the elementary school, about trying to figure out ways to make learning more experiential, and trips are some of that. I'm just wondering if there's been any movement in increasing some of the experiential opportunities, or if that's in planning or just been not implemented at all on that front. So you can either answer that now or let me know at another time.
Well, it's been a topic of the building steering committee at the middle school to look at some trips, and I know that there's been extensive discussion, some of it having to do with the time it takes and how much time you actually are there, and whether there would need to be an extended day, and what that would mean, what the ramifications are. So it is in discussion. And we did have a terrific experience for outdoor education at the middle school this year, at the start of the school, which was different, a different way to approach team building and so on with the environmental program from BOCES. So
well, we were talking about incorporating New York City into our lives more.
That's the trip. That was the trip that they've been talking about, the Hayden Planetarium, some other things. So it is in discussion, and it's complicated, but it's a topic on the building steering committee. If Jeannie were still here, she'd be able to report on it. She must have had to go. Or Travis, but he obviously had to leave too.
I sat in on the Con Edison meeting today about the energy performance contract. Just some updates of where things seem to be going, and some disappointments, I guess, to go along with what's coming out. It looks like solar is going to be less than what we thought because of the roof situation of the elementary school, where it can't handle the weight. There are the workarounds in other areas where solar are going to be implemented, but it will be less than what we were originally looking at. It will be visible. We made, a lot of the plan that was discussed today makes it visible, because on this campus it was going to be completely invisible, being on the roofs that are, outside of the visual. But all the things that are going to be put into place, there is going to be definitely, looks like, visual components to this and educational components. There will not necessarily, we will not have to do any of the tree cutting that we were talking about, because we can't put anything on the roof.
We have to do some tree
There's
cutting
some
for
other
reasons.
tree cutting in different areas, but it's not the massive tree cutting that we were talking about. There was also conversation today about the geothermal at the elementary school, and I wanted to get some thinking around the table on this one. The geothermal that they're planning or had thought about putting in the elementary school does not provide for the entire building as far as energy. It will reduce our need for oil, but it is not the huge game changer that that we're running completely on
Not
geothermal,
like this campus,
like we are on this campus. A lot of that has to do with the building construct and how being able to break even on the energy piece. So there was conversation, because I think the project is slated somewhere in that $6 to $7 million range, with $2.5 million being the geothermal, and it's break even. As far as the projection is not within the 18 years of the contract. It's much further. The whole thing is 18 years, but that piece is like 40 years. Something like, was it 40? 40 years for that portion of it to pay for itself. So one of the questions was, is that something we still want to move forward with? It's such a large part of the project, about 30% of the project.
It makes the overall pay, if you removed it, it makes the payoff shorter on the entire project. The payback, right?
It would.
Because you remove that
you-
from the 42-year from the mix.
It would.
Right.
It would just be a much smaller project. But the question is, a lot of this has to do with obviously just saving energy, and could be less about the cost. And we don't know it's uncertain what fuel will cost as we move forward. So it is a hedge against skyrocketing fuel costs. I mean, I'm of the opinion, I think it's a good idea for us to continue up with it, and they'll present when they come, and we can talk about it in more detail. I just want to make sure that gets on radar. Maybe Pat, you can send more stuff to the board about the components, and we can, talk about that idea. I still think it's a good idea to do it, even though it doesn't remove us from using oil. It does do a significant reduction in some of our oil use, which is always a good thing.
When will they be coming to present? Next board meeting. Okay.
So I just wanted to give you a heads up
That's
on
great, good, I'm glad you went.
on that. And then my other question is, we get a quarterly, or I guess 3 times a year, report from Brian on sports, which is great that we get that information. I think I don't know if it's Chris or somebody else. I think we should have, because right now our updates from clubs are kind of anecdotal. Students will say it, you'll say it, or a board member will bring, an update on a play or anything like that. I'm not going to say we need a club czar, but if something is more of an organized, consolidated presentation of stuff that's happening club-wise, because we got Make a Difference and all these other clubs that are doing all kinds of great things that sometimes we don't hear about. And if it's not top of mind, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle in this part of the meeting instead of being a real presentation. And I think the activities are just as important as the sports achievements. And I think we really should somehow figure out a way to regulate or regularize that type of
They don't
presentation.
have as easy a season.
Is it really a
But,
season? But we could do
we
something.
can do maybe
You
just a
know.
quarterly or a mid-year or a February or.
Because they're all doing something at
Right.
all times, and if they want to send a representative, and it's obvious, I'm assuming a teacher from each of those clubs are not going to 100%, but maybe the deciding student, or maybe you have the assistant principal be the
Do an
one
overall
who
summary.
gets reports
At
from them
least
and
once
presents
a
it.
year, if not twice.
Yeah,
right,
I mean, I
would say
think,
that.
Maybe twice
No,
a
I
year.
think that's
Yeah.
good. That's a very
Thanks,
good
Joe.
point.
So that's all I got. Sorry.
And I just want to piggyback on both our best wishes for our student doing her dissertation. The play was wonderful, and it was made even sweeter knowing that the set was designed and built by one of our graduates, Rachel Fitzgerald. So it's nice that we're training people, and we're saying people are going out in the world and learning skills and then coming back. So that just added a niceness to an incredibly talented and well-acted play.
What a
That was-
funny thing. It was so
Great. It's great.
And all on performance. The performances were outstanding, so congratulations again to all involved. Anything else from anybody else on the board?
I thought I'd just pass on something. At least once a week, I get a chance to get one of these wonderful emails passed on to me, and I just wanted to share one. I guess the public doesn't get a chance to see these all the time, but and rather than putting people on the spot, I'll just omit the names of people, so I don't really have to ask the permission or whatever. And this was just a note that went from a parent to one of our administrators, and it started with, "Hi, I just had to tell you how touched we are by our child's teacher's actions. As class parent, I was at the school to help out with the Halloween parade. In all the excitement of the day, I left without my son's costume, which I did not realize until my child's teacher was in my driveway. Most people would not have acted. It takes a very special person to go that extra mile to make sure their student's Halloween wasn't ruined. We are so lucky to have her as my child's teacher." And it's signed by the parent. It's just, I'm sure, you folks get them too. It's once a week, and it's just so wonderful to see that those kind of things go on, and there's a lot of special people out there, so thank you.
Thank you. And it is a nice reminder, nice to publicly celebrate that. Okay, so I'd like now for a motion to adjourn our business meeting, but to move into executive session for the purpose of, to discuss two matters made exempt under federal law, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, after which time there will be no additional business conducted.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Where's the
Happy
executive
and
session?